In a letter to his dear friend Lucilius, the Stoic philosopher Seneca expressed the idea that there are more things likely to frighten us than to crush us. He emphasized that we often suffer more in our imagination than in reality. Worried individuals tend to be more preoccupied with the future, with what is to come, than with present circumstances. Throughout the day and even during the night, our thoughts delve into the mysterious realm of the future, planning and strategizing how to deal with unfortunate situations or outcomes that may arise but may never come to pass. We spend hours contemplating potential future scenarios, such as how we would react if we discovered a spouse's betrayal or how we would handle being dismissed, facing responsibilities like rent and bills. I'll respond immediately to something. I won't accept any hindrance. What if the investment goes wrong and I lose all my money? What if I lose the house? What if my car gets stolen? What if I don't perform well in the presentation and risk losing the client's account? What if my business doesn't succeed and I have to look for a job again? Even though we strive to control the future, we can't surpass the limits of the present. The reason is clear: the future doesn't exist except in our minds. We cannot live in the future, nor can we predict the outcomes that lie ahead. Of course, we can plan, and planning is different from worrying. The ability to plan for the future is a cornerstone of our civilization. Humanity wouldn't have thrived if we hadn't organized, arranged, designed, prepared, and deferred gratification for greater causes. Consider the grandeur of the Cologne Cathedral in Germany. Construction started in 1248 and wasn't completed until around 1880 after approximately 300 years of interruptions across generations. They dedicated their lives to something they wouldn't see completed, demonstrating how long-term planning can result in extraordinary achievements, like traveling to the moon and possibly conducting a manned expedition to Mars. But there's a fundamental difference between planning and worrying. Do you agree? How do you strike a balance between these two extremes? Share your experience here, as your perspective may inspire and assist those who get lost in worry. Planning is constructive and focuses on our own actions in a conceptual future, while worrying is attempting to control the uncontrollable by repeating possible and even unrealistic scenarios repeatedly. Our worries may even consist of fantasies totally disconnected from reality. So, unlike planning, it is destructive. Yet, we continue to worry because, for some reason, we believe it will somehow help us. Unfortunately, worrying generally does more harm than good. The problem is that, in the present moment, a situation for which we create hundreds of possible outcomes unfolds in only one specific way. Moreover, the chances are that this situation might not even be something we could have envisioned among a million possibilities and still be wrong. What is the point of the impossible task of discovering exactly what the future will bring? There is no point, as the author Eckhart Tolle asserts. Worry pretends to be necessary but serves no useful purpose. Yet, many of us fixate our attention on the unknown and fantasize endlessly about things we cannot predict how they will unfold. Modern anxiety is fundamentally based on worries about things that will never happen. Some psychologists claim that modern anxiety is based on 5 categories of concerns, with 4 of them being imaginary. Only the 5th pertains to concerns that have a real basis, yet these make up only 8% of our total daily concerns. In other words, we are true masters in the art of worrying about nothing. And these concerns feed present fears, whether real or imaginary, revealing a truth as evident as it is difficult to accept. Most of our concerns have no real basis. However, this does not stop their devastating effects on our day-to-day lives. Stoics already perceived this tendency of ours centuries ago, to focus on the negative aspects of situations and excessively worry. They explained that animals flee from the dangers they encounter in reality and, after escaping, they don't worry anymore. However, we are tormented by the past and the future. Our blessing hurts us because memory returns us to the agony of fear, while anticipation provokes it prematurely. They meant to say that our minds are continually between the past and the future, between the mistakes and disasters we've experienced and those that could happen. Cicero, in his correspondence with his friend Lucilius, later published as Letters from a Stoic, countered this often tiresome and destructive posture regarding the illusory dominion of the future with Stoic reasoning. He explained that worrying about it is useless, advising what to do instead. This video explores Cicero's antidotes to worry and unfounded fears. Before we continue, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and watch it until the end to discover all the antidotes to worry. The idea that the future doesn't exist doesn't deny the passage of time, doesn't deny that what's happening now will soon be past, and that we're constantly exposed to a stream of novelty. Just as a mountain faces heavy and enduring rain, the storm cannot be controlled, coming from all directions and at different speeds, bringing with it gusts and thunder of all shapes and sizes. The mountain cannot predict what's to come, it can only endure and observe the downpours arrive and depart. As we observe moments go back and forth from what we call the future to the past, we know that something is yet to come. But no matter what we try to do with it and how well we try to prepare for it, we will always be shooting in the dark. That's why the future, as we imagine it, has no basis to actually happen. Since the future is nothing more than ideas that range from wild guesses and predictions based on past results and experiences. However, many people are overwhelmed by these ideas, causing them to suffer from unfounded fears based on nothing but speculation instead of reality. Consider Julia, after experiencing failed relationships, starts a new one with Dennis as he presents himself differently. However, her concerns persist, living completely in the world of what if. Julia is consumed by uncertainties and unfounded fears. What if the relationship ended in failure once again? Maybe I don't deserve to experience true love. Surely, he will betray me. In the midst of this mental turmoil, Julia neglected the future, which often eludes human control, unfolding in unpredictable ways. Baseless expectations and fears started to harm her relationship with Dennis, creating self-sabotage based on assumptions, not on actual facts. Julia's story truly illustrates how unfounded concerns rooted in past experiences can distort the perception of the present and cast a huge shadow over the future. By freeing herself from these apprehensions, Julia could make room for building a relationship grounded in the present reality, allowing destiny to reveal itself. The example was about a relationship, but it can happen in all scenarios of life. How often do we start a new job carrying the bad experiences from the old role? As Seneca stated, the truth has its defined limits, but what arises from uncertainty is given to guesswork and the irresponsible license of a frightened mind. He observed that some things affect us before they occur, and others affect us when, in reality, they will never happen. According to Seneca, this happens because we are habitually exaggerating. Imagining or anticipating sadness, Seneca's letter continues to describe the nature of the mind, telling Lucilius that it sometimes creates false forms of evil when there is no evil to be found. Or, as he asserts, it distorts for the worse any word of dubious meaning, or imagines that some personal conflict is more serious than it really is, considering how angry the enemy is. But to what extremes can it go if angered? This human habit of worrying is not only unpleasant. There is ample scientific evidence suggesting that worrying can literally make people ill. This means that, even though the future doesn't exist, we are worrying and getting sick because of it. Fortunately, Seneca's writings provide us with remedies. Whether our afflictions are real or imagined, Seneca proposed certain remedies to combat this human habit of worrying. His remedy boils down to strengthening the mind with certain ideas and truths about reality, as well as changing the attitude we adopt regarding luck and misfortune. Firstly, he reminds his friend Lucilius of the fact that, although many unfortunate things have overwhelmed him, he has always remained steadfast. So, it seems that in some way he has always been able to deal with everything that happened to him. When we look at the history of our own lives, we can conclude that what we perceive as an anticipated catastrophe usually ends up being different from what we imagine. Many times, we suffer less than we anticipate. The irony is that most of the suffering occurs before the actual event takes place. For example, we are anxious about taking an exam, and for weeks before, we worry every day, I'm going to blank out, I'll mess everything up, will I get too nervous? However, the anxiety we experience during the exam is insignificant compared to what we endure in the previous weeks. The root of this fear lies in our beliefs about the consequences of failing the exam. We might think, if I fail, my life is over, or if I don't pass this exam, then it's true what they say, I'm really weak. But these beliefs are not true, simply because the consequences they anticipate have not yet occurred and cannot be predicted. Even if some catastrophic beliefs about the future are plausible, since they are not materializing at this exact moment, by disturbing oneself, or as Cicero stated, you can counter with the question, how will I know if my sufferings are real or imaginary? Here is the rule for these situations: we are tormented by things present or by things future or by both. As for things present, the decision is easy. Suppose that you enjoy freedom and health, and that you suffer no external harm. As for what might happen in the future, we will see later. Today there is nothing wrong with that. In the same letter, Cicero encourages his friend Lucilius to be cautious about external influences when it comes to his personal situation. According to Cicero, it is better to trust ourselves and counsel with our feelings independently because we know our matters better than anyone else. We are easily affected by the opinions and views of others. Many people have narrow and even delirious visions of reality, claiming they can predict the future and readily plant their seeds of fear in our minds, leaving us uneasy about the situation we are in. Hence, we must be vigilant not to waste our mental and emotional energy on these bad influences. Seneca urges his friend to consult reason to see if he is not turning what is not a bad thing into a bad thing. Therefore, the antidote is that we carefully discern between imagination and reality. As soon as we discover that our fears are based on irrational thinking or fantasies, or they exaggerate our concerns, they dissipate. The problem arises when we want to control the future. To control the future, the mind tries to think of it as if it were the present. The mind somehow thinks that by calculating all possible options, it will gain control in the end. If we knew exactly what would happen, then we would indeed have an advantage over our own actions. For instance, we would know when our relationships would end and what actions we would need to take to become rich. However, the future is still out of control. The only difference is that we already know what happened, which makes it equal to the past, and we cannot control the past either. The only thing we can control is our own actions in the here and now. One cause of procrastination, for example, is the inability to distance ourselves from the past and the future and focus on the task at hand in the present moment. We can create a new past and influence the future, but that requires us to keep our focus on what we can do now. By breaking a task into manageable parts, we can work on pieces that greatly facilitate focus, forgetting the end result for a while and thinking only in terms of hours, sessions, or days. This relieves us from the undermining weight of seemingly impossible goals while we are still working on them in the best possible way. Worrying only prevents us from taking action, and the more we live in the future, the more our anxiety undermines our efforts to make a change. As written in the Bible in Matthew 6 verse 34, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble." Or as Seneca says in his work on the shortness of life, you are organizing what is in fortune's control and abandoning what is in your control. What are you looking at? What goal are you striving for? All the future is uncertain. Live immediately. Another antidote that Seneca proposes is a change of attitude towards what is to come. Seneca shows a certain openness of mind in his letter to Lucilius, urging him not to conclude too quickly about the nature of what fortune provides. Fortune, in this case, refers to the ancient deity Fortune, the goddess of chance, luck, and fate. Looking at our human ignorance not only about what will happen and how these events will unfold, but also about the nature of these events and how they will exactly affect our lives, it is better to be cautious when judging fate. In some cases, the bad luck we anticipate really materializes. However, events sometimes take such a radical and unexpected turn that, against all odds, we escape. There is a story that depicts what happens to people who judge based on what they do not know. This story is about an old farmer whose horse ran away. After hearing the news, his neighbors came to visit and said it was bad luck. "Perhaps," replied the farmer. But the next morning, the horse returned accompanied by 3 wild horses. "This is wonderful," exclaimed the neighbors. "Perhaps," replied the old man. The next day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses, but he ended up getting kicked and broke his leg. "What misfortune," said the sympathetic neighbors. "Perhaps," replied the farmer. The next day, military authorities came to the village to enlist the farmer's son in the army, but when they noticed the broken leg, they let him pass. So the neighbors congratulated the old farmer, saying how lucky he was for his son to be spared from the war. The farmer replied, "Perhaps." This Taoist story shows that we cannot judge what is desirable or undesirable when it comes to present events because we do not know how things will unfold. Things that seem bad can turn into blessings and vice versa. It makes no sense to wish for specific outcomes if we cannot judge their value. Perhaps losing a job is the best thing that could happen to us. Maybe losing our money leads us to live a much happier life. We simply do not know, but it is comforting to remember that every problem brings an opportunity with it. "Even bad luck is inconsistent," said Seneca. Therefore, the antidote is to keep an open mind about the future, knowing that we cannot judge the nature of an event before it happens and its consequences are revealed. So let's carefully examine the question. It is likely that some problems will happen to us, but it is not a present fact. How often has the unexpected happened? How often has the expected never materialized, and even if it is ordained to happen? What good does it do to rush to find your suffering? You will suffer soon enough when it happens, so in the meantime, look for better things. Seneca does not encourage his friend to be ignorant of the terrible destinies that can occur. He advocates observing carefully. On one hand, it is imprudent to deny misfortune. On the other hand, we should not let the slightest hint of adversity throw us into panic. It is essential to mention that worrying is terrible for our health. Worry comes from a place of fear and only generates more fear, becoming a vicious downward spiral. The chronic anxiety resulting from worry affects the immune system and can lead to physical illnesses. And when we become more receptive to diseases, we give ourselves one more thing to worry about. Being aware of the devastating consequences, combined with the knowledge that most of the things we worry about will not happen, and that we cannot correctly judge present events, we may want to prioritize our mental hygiene over all these things that we cannot control anyway. So, the key is to walk the middle path between ignorance and obsession, consciously evaluating the situation at hand, keeping all options open. Also, if we maintain an open mind about the nature of events, knowing that not everything is as it seems and that destiny is capricious like a summer storm, we will realize that our judgments about future events and even present ones are often mistaken, and our fears about them tedious. And even if it is certain that misfortune is on the way, if it has not yet arrived, why spend time suffering in advance in our imagination? Comment on what is keeping you up at night and if it really is worth your concern. Thank you for watching, and until next time.